So, I stayed quiet like she asked. Then, one evening, her boss came over for dinner. He heard me speak just one sentence, dropped his wine glass on the floor, and backed away from me like he had seen a ghost. He knew exactly who I was, and he knew which government I had been working for. My name is Sylvia Novak. I am 68 years old and live in a modest apartment in Chicago, not far from where my son Peter resides with his wife. I arrived in America in 1984, escaping communist Eastern Europe with only one small suitcase and a fierce determination to start over. At 30 years old, I was alone, terrified, and barely able to string together a handful of English words. Those early years tested me in every way. I cleaned offices at night, mopping floors and hauling trash while the city slept. By day, I attended free English classes at a local community center and practiced speaking with anyone patient enough to listen. My accent was heavy, and people often grew frustrated or asked me to repeat myself endlessly. But I refused to surrender. I persevered, learning slowly but steadily. Eventually, I found work as a home health aide, assisting the elderly with their daily needs. Later, I took a job at a neighborhood bakery, rising before dawn to knead dough and bake fresh bread. Every job, no matter how humble, felt like a step towards something better. I never complained, I simply kept moving forward, building a life for myself and the family I dreamed of one day having. I met my husband, Tomas, at a Polish cultural center in Chicago. He was gentle, hardworking, and had fled the same oppressive regime I had. We fell in love quickly and married within a year. Our son, Peter, arrived soon after. Those years were filled with simple joys. Watching him grow, sharing meals, and feeling the warmth of a family I had once feared I would never have. When Peter was 12, Tomas was diagnosed with cancer. He battled bravely for 2 years before the illness claimed him. After his death, I raised Peter alone. I worked extra shifts to cover his school fees and ensure he had opportunities one could only imagine as a child. I helped with homework even when the subjects baffled me, attended every game and parent-teacher meeting, and poured all my energy into giving him a stable, promising future. My efforts paid off. Peter became a successful accountant, graduated from a strong university, and built a career that filled me with immense pride. When he announced his engagement last year, I wept with joy. I believed my sacrifices had finally borne fruit. My son was thriving, happy, and starting his own family. Then I met Meredith. Meredith grew up in privilege, private schools, lavish trips, and a life curated for appearances. She works as a marketing executive at a prominent firm, where image is everything. Her home is immaculate, her wardrobe flawless, her demeanor polished. From our first meeting, I sensed her discomfort around me. She offered polite smiles but kept a careful distance. She asked about my life but rarely listened to my replies. Whenever I spoke in front of her friends, her eyes would dart away or she'd glance at her phone, as if my words were an inconvenience. Peter changed after the wedding. He visited less, called less, and seemed tense whenever we were together. I watched my son drift away, and the pain was indescribable. But Meredith did not know everything about me. Neither did Peter. Before coming to America, I was not merely a translator in a government office. I worked for a covert intelligence operation, translating intercepted messages for Western agencies. My role was perilous and entirely secret. When my cover was nearly blown, I fled my country in a matter of hours, abandoning my identity to avoid arrest or execution. For 40 years, I kept this hidden, to shield my son and because some truths are too burdensome to reveal. Secrets, however, have a habit of emerging when least expected. It happened on a Sunday in early spring. Peter called during the week and invited me to dinner at their home. Meredith was hosting colleagues, and she wanted the evening to be perfect. He said it would mean the world to him if I attended. I was surprised. Meredith had never seemed keen to include me in her gatherings, but I agreed. Peter was my son, and I would always be there for him. I spent the day before baking my grandmother's apple strudel and chose my finest dress, a deep blue one reserved for special occasions. I wanted to look respectable, to show Meredith I could blend in. When I arrived, Meredith took the strudel without comment and whispered to me privately, "Sylvia, tonight is important. Please don't talk much. Your accent is thick and, honestly, a bit embarrassing. These are key people from my company, and I need them to see me as professional, not unsophisticated." Her words pierced me. I had lived in this country for 40 years, worked tirelessly, raised a successful son who married someone like her. Yet my voice, the one that carried my history and resilience, was deemed shameful. I wanted to defend it as a mark of survival, but her cold stare told me she would never understand. So I nodded and remained silent. The dinner was agonizing. Her colleagues arrived in designer clothes, discussing exotic vacations and corporate deals. No one spoke to me. When someone asked Peter about his family, he hesitated, glanced at me guiltily, and gave a vague reply before changing the topic. He erased my existence from his story to spare Meredith discomfort. That hurt more than her earlier words. Afterward, I thanked them politely, hugged Peter, and drove home. I sat in my car and cried for 20 minutes before I could leave. 2 weeks later, Peter called again, sounding anxious. Meredith was hosting her boss, Richard Caldwell, a senior executive whose approval could secure her promotion. Peter begged me to come, but added that Meredith wanted me to keep things simple, code for staying quiet. I nearly refused. But I loved my son too much to deny him. Still, something inside me shifted. After decades of endurance, I refused to be silenced again. I would attend, but on my own terms. I prepared carefully, wearing the elegant black dress from Peter's graduation and the pearl earrings Tomas gave me. In the mirror, I saw a survivor worthy of respect. At the house, Meredith greeted me with her usual strained smile and whispered her reminder. I smiled and said nothing. The guests arrived, and the atmosphere was polished perfection. When Richard Caldwell entered, Meredith introduced everyone eagerly. When she reached me, she said, "This is Sylvia, Peter's mother." Richard shook my hand and asked casually, "Where are you from originally?" Meredith stiffened. Peter looked away. They expected me to give a brief answer and fade into silence. Instead, I met Richard's eyes and answered clearly in my accented English, naming the small Eastern European town of my birth. His face drained of color. His hand froze mid-reach for his wine glass, which slipped and shattered on the floor. Red wine pooled like blood. Everyone froze. Richard stared at me in shock. "It can't be. Nightingale." The name echoed through the room, my old code name from 40 years ago. I held his gaze. "I haven't heard that name in a very long time." Trembling, Richard explained. In the early 1980s, he was a young analyst for American intelligence, processing translations from a secret source inside communist Eastern Europe, Nightingale. Her work exposed military secrets, corruption, and threats that saved countless lives. She was considered one of the Cold War's most vital assets. Then her messages stopped. They assumed she had been caught and killed. They mourned her as a hero. Richard looked at me with tears in his eyes. "You are Nightingale. You survived. You've been here all this time." I nodded. I told him how my cover was compromised, how I fled with nothing, and how I rebuilt my life in silence to protect my son. The room was stunned. I turned to everyone and said, "My accent is not an embarrassment. It is the voice that carried truths that helped end an empire. It is proof of what I endured for freedom." Richard took my hands, tears streaming. "Mrs. Novak, your courage shaped history. We thought you were gone. This is the greatest moment of my career." He turned to Meredith. "Do you realize who she is? Your mother-in-law is a legend. Governments relied on her work. You should be honored to have her in your family." Meredith stood frozen, her composure shattered. The guests bombarded Richard with questions as he shared Cold War stories, speaking of me with profound admiration. Later, after the guests left, Peter sat with me, tears in his eyes. Mom, I had no idea. All these years. I let Meredith make you feel small. I was weak. I'm so sorry. I forgave him. Parents sacrifice so their children can have better lives. I only want you to know that true respect comes from how we treat others. Meredith came down, makeup streaked, looking diminished. Sylvia, I judged you horribly. Your accent, your life, I was wrong and cruel. I am deeply sorry. I accepted her apology, telling her that judging by appearances is easy, but seeing the truth requires humility. That night, I drove home feeling unburdened. In my apartment, I gazed at the city lights and thought of the young woman who fled in 1984, carrying secrets that could have destroyed her. My daughter-in-law once wanted my voice silenced because of my accent. But that accent once delivered messages that helped dismantle tyranny. I am proud of every hardship, every sacrifice, every word spoken in my imperfect English. My voice is not a flaw, it is a testament to survival.